My daughter-in-law mocked my old truck. She cried when I pulled up in my $4 million vintage collection. The insult was public, a cruel joke at my grandson's birthday party designed to humiliate me. She thought she was exposing my poverty. Instead, she lit the fuse to her own destruction. But before we continue, subscribe to the channel and tell us where you're watching from. The humiliation was a physical thing, a hot poker in my gut. I stayed for my grandson, of course. I watched him blow out his 5 candles, his face glowing with pure joy. And for a moment, the ugliness receded. But when it was time to leave, the walk to my truck felt like a mile under the judgmental stares of Amelia's friends. As I climbed into the cab, the familiar scent of old vinyl and engine oil was a comfort. It was the scent of honesty, of hard work. I glanced back at the house, a perfect, sterile box of beige siding and emotionless windows. Leo stood on the porch, watching me, his shoulders slumped. He gave a weak, helpless wave. I didn't wave back. I just turned the key, and the old engine rumbled to life, a loyal and steady heartbeat. The drive home was a blur of righteous anger. For years, I had swallowed her little condescensions, her passive-aggressive remarks about my simple life. I did it for Leo, for the fragile piece of the family. I had paid for their wedding. I had given them the down payment for that very house. I had sold a piece of my soul to fund Leo's education, all so he could marry a woman who measured a man's worth by the shine on his car. The anger wasn't hot and explosive. It was cold and heavy, settling deep in my bones. It was the kind of anger that doesn't just lash out. It waits. It plans. As I pulled into my long gravel driveway, the setting sun glinting off the windows of my quiet farmhouse, I knew the time of waiting was over. She had finally pushed too far. She had mistaken my patience for weakness. That was a fatal error. The twist wasn't just that she was wrong about my finances. The twist was that she had just handed me the very weapon I needed. She had made my truck, my simple, honest truck, the symbol of this war. And I knew exactly how to make her regret it. The hook was a single clear thought that echoed with the sound of my truck's engine cooling in the barn. She wants to talk about assets. Fine, let's talk about assets. The next day, the declaration of war arrived in a crisp white envelope. It wasn't a bomb. It was worse. It was a certified letter from a law firm. Her father's law firm. Inside, the cold legal jargon spelled out their plan. They were petitioning the court to have me declared financially incompetent. My old truck was cited as Exhibit A, my refusal to part with it, a sign of a deteriorating mind. Their stated goal was to gain power of attorney over my affairs, to protect my interests. I knew what that meant. It meant selling my farm, my home for 40 years, the land my late wife Elena had loved. The fury that rose in me was ice cold. This wasn't a sudden insult at a party. This was a premeditated, calculated attack on my life and my legacy. I didn't call Leo. I didn't call a lawyer. I walked out of the house, across the yard, and into the cavernous silence of my main barn. The F-150 was parked in its usual spot, looking more like a faithful friend than a piece of evidence. I walked past it, past the stacks of hay bales and old tools, to the back wall. There, hidden behind a false panel I'd built myself 30 years ago, was a heavy steel door. I unlocked it. The air that hit me was cool and still, smelling of polished steel and expensive leather. I flipped a switch, and rows of soft spotlights illuminated the truth. There, gleaming like a sapphire jewel, was the perfect, unmistakable fender of a 1967 Shelby GT 500. It was the first car I ever bought and restored after Elena passed, the one that started it all. She thought my truck was my only story. She had no idea it was just the cover of a book she wasn't worthy of reading. The reveal was this secret museum, this cathedral of horsepower and history she was trying to steal. As I ran a hand over the Shelby's ploughless paint, a cold certainty settled over me. She started a war with a piece of paper. I would answer with an arsenal of legends.
The stakes escalated the next morning with a phone call. It was Leo. His voice was a wretched mix of guilt and weakness. "Dad, I didn't know they were going to do this," he stammered. He explained that Amelia and her father were pushing hard, using their connections to get a court date for the competency hearing set in a matter of weeks. Then came the confession that chilled me to the bone. "They've been going through your mail when they visit. They've been building a case for months. My own son had allowed them to spy on me in my own home." The anger I felt was quickly replaced by a profound, aching sorrow. It wasn't his betrayal that hurt the most. It was his weakness. After the call, I went to the old roll-top desk in my study, a place I hadn't touched in years. From a locked bottom drawer, I pulled out a heavy steel footlocker. The emotional beat was one of pure, painful nostalgia. Inside wasn't treasure, but memories more valuable than gold. Faded photographs of Elena and me, young and beaming. And beneath them, stacks of papers, invoices, bills of sale, letters from buyers. Each one was a ghost of a sacrifice. I saw the invoice for a 1969 Camaro ZL1 I sold to fund Leo's entire Ivy League education. I saw the wire transfer confirmation for a pristine Porsche 356 Speedster, the proceeds of which paid for his lavish wedding to Amelia. I had dismantled a part of my dream to build his. The reveal, the twist that solidified my resolve, was at the very bottom. It was a faded Polaroid of a younger me and Elena, standing proudly beside the first car I ever truly loved, a 1955 Mercedes-Benz 300 SL Gullwing. Tucked behind it was a note in her elegant script: "Don't ever sell this one. It's our dream." They thought I was incompetent, but every invoice in this box was a strategic move, a silent sacrifice that built the life they were now trying to tear down. They had no idea who they were dealing with. The walls were closing in. Amelia's father, a well-connected local judge, was pulling strings, and the hearing was now just 2 weeks away. They were building a narrative of a confused old man, and it was sticking. I was cornered, isolated. It was time to make my one and only phone call. The emotional beat was a flicker of fear, the primal anxiety of reaching out for help mixed with a sliver of hope. I drove the old Ford to a quiet diner in the next town over and sat in a booth. A few minutes later, a man in a perfectly tailored suit slid in opposite me. It was Marcus, an old friend I hadn't seen in a decade. His face, etched with the calm confidence of a man who argued multi-million-dollar deals for a living, broke into a warm smile. "Frank," he said, "you look like you've seen a ghost." I pushed the legal notice across the table. As he read, his smile vanished, replaced by a look of cold fury. "They what?" he said, his voice low. I told him everything. He listened, his eyes never leaving mine. The twist, the reveal that would change the entire game, was that Marcus wasn't just an old friend I'd called for advice. "Frank," he said, shaking his head, "for 15 years, I was your silent partner. I handled the shell corporations, the overseas buyers, the wire transfers. I built the legal fortress that made you a ghost." He started to laugh, a low, dangerous sound. "They're trying to have a ghost declared incompetent?" He tapped the papers. "This isn't a legal filing, Frank. It's a gift." He leaned forward, his eyes gleaming with the thrill of the fight. The hook was his final chilling promise before he left the diner. "Let them build their case. We'll build a stage. And when the curtain rises, they'll be the only clowns on it."
Their next move was exactly what Marcus predicted. They got bolder. Feeling confident, they sent a court-appointed appraiser to my farm to formally value the land for the hearing. Their goal was simple: to get an official document stating the property's only value was the acreage and that the barns were filled with worthless junk. I saw him pull up in a pristine sedan, a man in a cheap suit with a clipboard and a smug expression. I decided to give him the performance of a lifetime.
I shuffled out to meet him, playing the part of the frail, slightly confused old farmer to perfection. An appraiser? Oh my! I get so mixed up these days, I said, my voice trembling slightly. The emotional beat was a quiet, simmering tension as I led him through the property. He barely glanced at the land, his eyes fixed on the barns. "So this is where you keep the collection?" he asked, a smirk playing on his lips. I saw the judgment in his eyes as he documented the junk. Piles of dusty tarps, old engine blocks, stacks of antique license plates. He was writing their script for them. As we entered the main barn, I waited for the perfect moment. While he was busy taking a photo of a stack of old tires, I tripped over a loose floorboard, stumbling hard against a large tarp-covered shape. With a theatrical grunt, I knocked the heavy canvas to the floor. For a single, breathtaking moment, the unmistakable chrome grille and iconic quad headlights of a 1961 Ferrari 250 GT California Spider were revealed gleaming under a stray beam of sunlight. The appraiser's jaw physically dropped. His pen clattered to the concrete floor. "Oh my goodness!" I exclaimed, rushing to cover it up again. "My old project car. Just more junk, I'm afraid." But the damage was done. The hook was the dazed, bewildered look in his eyes as he left, his tidy report now hopelessly compromised. He had seen something impossible, something that didn't fit the narrative. He had seen a ghost, and now the ghost was starting to haunt them. The appraiser's report must have been a mess of contradictions because 2 days later, Leo's car was coming up my driveway. He got out and walked toward me, not with the swagger of his mother-in-law, but with the heavy gait of a man carrying a terrible weight. He had seen the report. He had confronted Amelia. He finally knew the truth. She wants to start a boutique, a high-end furniture store. Her father was going to back her. They needed the money from the sale of the farm to do it. The emotional beat wasn't anger, but a deep, resonant sadness. My son, my only child, had been a pawn in their game of greed. He finally looked at me, his eyes swimming with a lifetime of guilt. "I never felt like I was enough," he confessed, his voice cracking. "You were always so capable, so quiet and strong. I could never measure up." In that moment, I didn't see the man who had betrayed me. I saw the little boy who was afraid of the dark. I motioned for him to follow me into the house, to the old footlocker in my study. I didn't show him the invoices this time. I showed him the photo of me and my mother, young and full of hope, standing by the silver gull wing. "Your mother and I built this life with our hands. Every car, every sale. It wasn't about the money, son. It was about building a future for you that I never had. A future you were helping them take away." I let the words hang in the air between us. The reveal was the dawning horror on his face, the slow, sickening realization of his complicity. The hook was his choked, barely audible whisper, a question that hung in the quiet room like a death sentence. "Dad, what have I done?"
It was time to stop playing defense. With Leo's confession confirming their motives, Marcus and I moved to offense. The plan was simple, elegant, and ruthless. We didn't file a countersuit. We didn't make threats. We planted a seed. Marcus, through a series of anonymous, untraceable connections, leaked a single tip to a world-renowned vintage car blog. The headline read, "The Ghost of Somerset County. Has a legendary lost collection been found?" The post contained a single, grainy, long-lens photograph, the very picture the appraiser had undoubtedly described to Amelia's father, showing the unmistakable grille of the Ferrari 250 GT, partially obscured by a tarp. The post didn't give my name or address, but it mentioned the small, obscure county I lived in. The effect was instantaneous. The blog post went viral. The emotional beat was a surge of pure, unadulterated triumph. It felt like launching the first perfect volley in a chess match. Within hours, the story was picked up by other automotive sites, then luxury lifestyle magazines. The comments section exploded with speculation. Was it real? Who was the collector? The twist, the true genius of Marcus's plan, was a single paragraph buried deep in the article. It mentioned, almost as an aside, a strange local legal case involving an elderly man's competency hearing, hinting that a predatory family might be attempting to seize a hidden fortune. We hadn't just revealed the car. We had framed their entire lawsuit in a new sinister light. Public opinion, at least in the niche world of high-end collectors, began to turn. The hook came in the form of a frantic, sputtering phone call from Amelia that evening. "What is going on?" she shrieked. "People are calling my father's office. Reporters are asking about some old car. You have to stop this." I just stayed silent for a moment before replying calmly, "I have no idea what you're talking about, Amelia," and gently hung up the phone. The hornet's nest had been kicked. Our small town, usually sleepy and quiet, was suddenly buzzing with energy. Cars I didn't recognize drove slowly past my farm. A local news van was parked at the end of my road. Amelia and her father, trapped and panicked, made a critical mistake. They doubled down. They released a formal statement through their lawyer, decrying the malicious online rumors and painting me as a vulnerable elderly man being manipulated by internet pranksters for financial gain. They were trying to regain control of the narrative, to cast themselves as the victims. The emotional beat was a cold, sharp anger at their sheer audacity. They were calling me the victim of a hoax they had forced me to create. It was time for the second volley. While they were busy talking to the press, Marcus and I executed the next phase. We released a second anonymous leak, this time to a different set of journalists, the kind who specialized in financial reporting. It wasn't a photo. It was a scanned copy of an old document, the invoice for the complete museum-quality restoration of the 1967 Shelby GT 500. We redacted the buyer's name and address, but left two key details visible: the final price, a number well into 7 figures, and the date of the sale. The reveal was the genius of that date. It was from May of the year Leo graduated from college. We didn't need to connect the dots. We just let the information sit there. The whisper campaign began almost immediately. The town's gossip shifted. It was no longer about the crazy old man with his junk. It was about the source of the family's money. It was about the high-powered lawyer's daughter and her expensive lifestyle. The hook was the question that started circulating over coffee at the local diner and in the aisles of the grocery store. Did that old farmer pay for everything?
The narrative was officially out of their control. Her father, the judge, was now the subject of intense scrutiny. His friends in high places were distancing themselves. The media circus was no longer about a senile old man, but about a potentially corrupt public official and his greedy daughter. They were bleeding, and they knew it. That's when he showed up at my farm, unannounced. Amelia's father. He didn't come in his luxury sedan, but in a modest car, trying to project an image of humility. He stood on my porch, his face a mask of forced sincerity, and made his move. He offered me a pre-hearing settlement. They would drop the competency suit, publicly retract their statements, and make this all go away. The price? I would agree to a discreet sale of the farm and its contents, and they would take a modest 70% of the proceeds to cover their legal fees and emotional distress. The emotional beat was one of absolute ice-cold clarity. The rage was gone, replaced by a profound sense of resolve. I was no longer a victim. I was in control. I looked at this man, this pillar of the community who had tried to destroy me, and I felt nothing but a quiet contempt. I let him finish his pathetic, rambling offer. Then I delivered the twist. My counteroffer. "I'll consider dropping this," I said, my voice even and calm, "on one condition." He leaned in, desperate. "You have your daughter sign a post-nuptial agreement, effective immediately. In it, she forfeits any and all claim to any inheritance, trust, or asset she might ever receive from Leo or his estate. She walks away with what she came with. Nothing." The hook was the look on his face. It wasn't anger. It was pure, unadulterated shock. He had walked in thinking he was negotiating a financial settlement. He walked out realizing I wasn't after money. I was after justice. And I was coming for her daughter's entire future. The morning of the hearing was a media spectacle. The small county courthouse was surrounded by news vans and reporters, their cameras aimed like rifles at the entrance. I saw Amelia and her father arrive, pushing through the crowd. They wore expressions of grim determination, still clinging to the hope that their friend, the presiding judge, would shut the whole thing down. They walked into the courthouse, into the trap they had set for me, but which was now about to spring on them. The emotional beat for me as I sat in my truck a block away, watching, was a quiet, steely calm. The rage had burned away, leaving behind only the pure, hard certainty of my purpose. Then it was my turn. Marcus pulled up beside me in his own car. We exchanged a single, knowing nod. He would go in first. I waited 5 minutes, then I started the engine. But I wasn't in my old Ford. The sound that echoed through the town square wasn't the rumble of an old workhorse, but the deep, throaty purr of a legend. I pulled up directly in front of the courthouse steps, not in my old truck, but in the 1955 Mercedes-Benz 300 SL Gullwing. The sun glinted off the silver paint, a vision from another era. The crowd of reporters fell silent for a heartbeat, then erupted into a frenzy of shouting and flashing cameras. The iconic gullwing door lifted gracefully. The reveal was me, stepping out not in my worn farm clothes, but in a dark, impeccably tailored suit that Marcus had insisted on. I was no longer Frank, the crazy old farmer. I was the ghost from the internet, made real. The hook was the image I saw through the glass doors of the courthouse. Amelia, her face ashen, her mouth slightly agape, staring at the multi-million-dollar masterpiece on the courthouse steps and the man who had just stepped out of it, her father-in-law.
The courtroom was a pressure cooker. Amelia and her father sat at their table, looking shaken. Their lawyer started, trying to dismiss the media theatrics outside, but his voice lacked conviction. The judge, a man who clearly wished he were anywhere else, looked on grimly. Then it was Marcus's turn. He stood, calm and methodical, and he didn't just defend me. He systematically dismantled them. He began not with arguments, but with evidence. The petition claims my client, Mr. Franklin Croft, is financially incompetent, Marcus began, his voice filling the room. Let's examine his finances. What followed was a masterclass in legal destruction. On a large screen, he presented a full audited portfolio of my collection, valued by Sotheby's at a conservative estimate of over $4 million. He showed deeds for properties I owned in 3 different states. He displayed bank statements from accounts in Switzerland. He presented notarized letters from respected collectors around the world, testifying to my shrewdness and expertise. The emotional beat was one of pure, righteous vindication. Every document Marcus showed was a silent testament to my life's work, my foresight, my discipline. I watched Amelia's face crumble, her mask of superiority dissolving into raw disbelief. Her father stared blankly, as if he couldn't process the information. The twist, the final, devastating blow, was Marcus's last exhibit. He presented the documents for a trust fund, established 15 years prior. This irrevocable trust in the name of Leo Croft was funded by the sale of 2 of my client's vehicles, Marcus explained. It was designed to mature on Leo's 45th birthday, ensuring his family's security for life. He paused, letting the weight of his next words settle. A trust that, had this petition succeeded, would have fallen under the complete control of the petitioner, Amelia Croft. The hook was the judge, his face pale, slamming his gavel down. He looked not at me, but at Amelia's father, his supposed friend, with undisguised disgust. This hearing is recessed, and I am referring this entire matter to the State Bar for investigation. Game, set, match. That evening, the world was quiet again. The reporters were gone, chasing the news story of the disgraced judge. The phone had stopped ringing. I was in the main barn, the big doors wide open to the cool night air, the soft spotlights illuminating the collection. This was my sanctuary, my life's work standing silent witness. I heard the crunch of gravel and saw Leo's car pull up. He didn't go to the house. He walked straight to the barn, stopping at the entrance. The emotional beat was a heavy, profound silence, as my son looked upon my secret life for the first time. He walked slowly past the Shelby, the Ferrari, the Aston Martin, his face a canvas of awe, wonder, and a soul-crushing shame. He finally stopped in front of the Gullwing, the car his mother had loved. He didn't speak for a long time. When he did, his voice was thick with tears. "I'm so sorry, Dad," he whispered, finally meeting my eyes. It wasn't a panicked apology like the ones before. This was the real thing. It wasn't just about the money. I was weak. I let her disrespect you because it was easier than standing up to her. I'm sorry I never took the time to see who you really are. It was the apology I had waited years to hear. The reveal wasn't a car or a document. It was a moment of pure, painful human connection. I walked over to the hook by the door and took down a set of keys. I held them out to him. He thought they were for the Gullwing, but they were the worn, simple keys to the 1985 Ford F-150. "This one," I said, my voice steady, "is the most important one. It carries the groceries, it hauls the lumber, it never lets you down. It reminds you where you came from." The hook was the look on his face as his fingers closed around the old familiar keys, a silent promise to finally understand the difference between price and value.
The consequences of their actions cascaded swiftly and brutally. As Marcus predicted, the State Bar launched a full-scale investigation into Amelia's father for abuse of his position and attempted fraud. He was forced to take an immediate leave of absence, his career and reputation in tatters. The competency case was dismissed with prejudice, meaning they could never file it again. Their social circle, built on a foundation of perceived power and wealth, evaporated overnight. The friends who had laughed at my truck now crossed the street to avoid Amelia. The emotional beat was not one of triumphant glee, but a quiet, somber sense of balance being restored. I had simply held up a mirror, and the universe had delivered the verdict. My revenge was my silence. I didn't file a lawsuit for defamation. I didn't speak to the reporters who still called occasionally. I let their actions speak for themselves. The most satisfying victory was watching their own greed become the instrument of their downfall. The twist, the unexpected development, came about a week later. An envelope arrived in the mail. It wasn't from a law firm. The returned address was a small, rented apartment across town. It was from Amelia. I almost threw it away,
but my curiosity got the better of me. Inside was a single sheet of stationery, filled with her handwriting. It wasn't a polished, lawyer-approved apology. It was a desperate, rambling, tear-stained confession. It spoke of her insecurity, her jealousy of the bond I had with Leo, her foolishness in equating wealth with worth. It wasn't an excuse, but for the first time, it felt like an explanation. The hook wasn't in her words, but in what they represented. The complete and total surrender of the woman who had tried to ruin me. Leo sat across from me at the old oak table in my kitchen, the same table where he'd done his homework as a boy. He slid Amelia's letter back toward me. He had read it too. "She's a mess," he said quietly. "Her father won't speak to her. She's lost everything. She wants to see you, Dad, to apologize in person." He looked down at his hands. "I'll support whatever you want to do. If you want me to file for divorce, I'll do it tomorrow. After all this, you owe her nothing." The emotional beat was heavy with the weight of the future. Vengeance was complete. Justice had been served. Now came the harder part, what to do with the wreckage. I could banish her from our lives forever, and no one would blame me. I could have my son all to myself. But then I thought of my grandson. I thought of his bright, innocent face as he blew out his birthday candles. I thought of my late wife, Elena, a woman whose heart was always bigger than any grievance. She believed in building things, not tearing them down. The final piece of my story couldn't be about destruction. It had to be about grace. The revealed was my decision, a choice that surprised even myself. "It's not about forgiveness, Leo," I said slowly. "That's a long road, but it is about your son. He deserves a mother, and if she's truly willing to change, he deserves a chance at a whole family." I took a deep breath. "I'll see her, not for her sake, for his." The hook was the location I chose, the final move in this long, painful chess game. I told Leo to have her meet me at a specific time and place, not at the farm, not in some sterile lawyer's office, but in the quiet diner in the next town over, in the very same booth where I had first met with Marcus and planned my war. It was time to bring the journey full circle. The bell above the diner door jingled softly. Amelia walked in, looking small and fragile without her armor of expensive clothes and sharp sarcasm. She slid into the booth opposite me, her eyes red-rimmed and fixed on the tabletop. She apologized. She cried. She talked about her own flawed upbringing, about a father who taught her that value was something you acquire, not something you possess intrinsically. I listened without interruption, letting the silence do most of the work. The emotional beat was a quiet, profound sense of closure. I hadn't come for an apology, but hearing it settled something deep within me. When she was finished, I finally spoke. I didn't offer her easy forgiveness or a warm embrace. I offered her the hard truth. "Trust isn't a switch you can flip back on, Amelia," I told her, my voice calm but firm. "You broke something, and it will take a very long time to mend. Your relationship with me, with Leo, will be on my terms from now on. It will be built on honesty and respect, or it won't be built at all." She nodded, accepting the terms of her surrender. The final reveal wasn't a secret or a twist, but a quiet act of humanity. For the sake of my grandson, I was leaving the door to our family open, just a crack. It was up to her to earn her way back through it. I left a few dollars on the table for the coffee and stood up. I walked out of the diner and into the bright afternoon sun. My chariot was waiting. Not the Gullwing, not the Ferrari, but my old, reliable Ford F-150. I climbed into the cab, the seat sighing comfortably under my weight. I turned the key, and the engine rumbled to life, a familiar, steady heartbeat. As I pulled out onto the highway, leaving the diner and the wreckage of the past in my rearview mirror, I didn't feel triumph or anger. I felt peace. I had been tested, and I had endured. I had reclaimed my dignity not through dominance or cruelty, but through quiet, unshakable self-worth. The final image was just me, a man in his old truck, driving down the open road, finally, truly free.